Hello, homeless liaisons. Thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to listen to this webinar. My name is Vanessa Waters, and I am the McKinney-Vento and Immigrant Grant Manager at the Tennessee Department of Education. During this webinar, I will provide a quick overview for identifying homeless students. I will talk about homeless data and classifications and homeless status applies for the school year. I will talk about McKinney-Vento students serves as well as unaccompanied homeless youth. Then I will move on to look at homeless student research query and discrepancies. Lastly, I will wrap up with resources and contact information. So let's go ahead and look at identifying homeless students. When determining eligibility, you want to consider three things. A child or youth who lives in a situation that is not fixed, regular, or adequate is considered homeless. Fixed being stationary, permanent, not subject to change, not moving on wheels. Regular use on a nightly basis, predictable, routine, consistent basis, and adequate, lawfully and reasonably sufficient for meeting the physical, psychological, and safety needs typically met in a home environment. If a child or youth lacks any one of these conditions, then they would be considered McKinney-Vento. Again, fixed, regular, and adequate is going to be guidance and is not the actual statute for determining eligibility. As a best practice, LEAs should use a housing questionnaire to help identify students experiencing homelessness, including a housing or nighttime residency questionnaire in the LEA's enrollment packet to screen for possible McKinney-Vento eligibility, translating forms used to identify homeless students to languages frequently used in the district, and designating someone at each school to review the forms or online responses. All of these things will help with the identification of McKinney-Vento students and providing services. Identification is the critical first step to ensuring that the provisions of needed supports are given to students experiencing homelessness. I have provided some sample questions to use on your housing questionnaire or nighttime residency form here on the slide. You can also find a housing questionnaire template in ePlan and TDOE resources, ESSA, information, guidance, PowerPoints, and webinars, and then to your Title IX Part A Education for Homeless Children and Youth. And from there, you can scroll to the McKinney-Vento Toolkit and resources that you will find beneficial to your homeless program. There is no login information required to be able to access ePlan or the toolkit. So let's look at sharing the housing of other persons. It's also known as doubled up, and it occurs when a family, student, or unaccompanied homeless youth is living in someone's residence. Liaisons can use these clarifying questions to help determine if a student is eligible for services under McKinney-Vento. Does the family or youth have any legal right to be in the home? And can the family or youth be asked to leave at any time with no legal recourse? Now let's look at loss of housing. The family, student, unaccompanied homeless youth have no personal housing available. So some clarifying questions that could be used to help McKinney-Vento eligibility. Was there an eviction or foreclosure that forced the family from their living situation? Or is there destruction of or damage to a previous home, maybe a natural disaster, a flood, maybe it was unsafe due to mold, mildew, unsafe conditions? Are they fleeing domestic violence? Maybe it was abuse or neglect. The absence of a parent or guardian due to abandonment, parental incarceration, or a similar reason could all be reasons why the student would be eligible for McKinney-Vento services. Again, each determination is case by case and would need to talk with the family or unaccompanied homeless youth to determine eligibility. Economic hardship implies that a limited financial resource has been has forced the family or youth to leave the personal residence or share housing due to inability to pay for rent or mortgage or other bills. So pretty much the family maybe has been evicted due to lack of payment for their mortgage, maybe their rent, or they just were not able to pay all of the other bills. And so based on that, they were forced to move out. Some clarifying questions to use with that is, did economic hardship due to an accident, maybe a family illness, maybe a loss of an employment or a job, loss of public benefits, or similar reasons that the family was forced to move out? Again, maybe they lost their job and so they weren't able to pay their rent anymore, and so then they were evicted from their housing. And then in this situation, is it going to be, if it's shared housing, is it going to be temporary? Is a plan for them to move in, to get back on their feet, and be able to establish a housing situation, maybe through community partners, through HUD, or is this going to be a permanent move-in with a family member, friend, whoever it may be, because the situation is going to be beneficial for both of the families? Again, clarifying questions to consider when you're determining eligibility. So again, some helpful considerations to consider when determining eligibility is how how the shared housing came about, the intention of the residents. Did the family choose to live with a grandparent to save money, or maybe if they had some additional support, some help to care for the child, and so maybe because of that they chose to move in with a grandparent or a family member in order to save money so they could be able to afford their own house. But then if the family was evicted and they are moving in with a grandparent because of an eviction or similar reason, then that situation would be McKinney-Vento. When determining eligibility, you want to consider three things: fixed, regular, adequate. Again, I mentioned back at the beginning what fixed, regular, and adequate would look like, and making sure you're looking at that when you're considering if a student is McKinney-Vento eligible. To better assist families, ensure that you avoid using the term homeless and use the words such as temporary or transitional housing. Ensure that the discussions are held in a private place to help protect the family's right to privacy, and also so the family feels comfortable sharing about their situation. A lot of times these situations are not easy, and the family is embarrassed by them and don't want the entire school or whoever's in the office to kind of know about their situation. And so again, that would be a way to ensure that this family does have their privacy. You want to explain to the family or the unaccompanied homeless youth that this is a temporary housing situation and they're eligible for services under McKinney-Vento, such as transportation to school if needed, free school meals, additional services such as academic supports, educational needs, extracurricular activity, things like that that may be able to assist the student in being educationally and academically successful. So let's look at some homeless data. Based on updated guidance from ED and SEA's collection of homeless data, there are now only 2 homeless fields applied to all homeless students. They are required when classifying homeless students. First, H is used to classify homeless students. And second is primary nighttime residence coded 01 through 04. There are 2 other fields that only apply to homeless students served with McKinney-Vento subgrant funds and homeless unaccompanied youth. Let's break that down a little bit further. The homeless student classification H is the core homeless identifier for funding, assessment, accountability, and other reporting to both the state and federal reporting agencies. Homeless students are part of the economically disadvantaged ED subgroup because they are categorically eligible for free school meals due to their homeless status. As I mentioned earlier, due to updated guidance from ED, please do not code homeless students with the direct cert of economic disadvantage J student classification in addition to homeless student classification, unless the student meets the the qualification for the J code through direct certification for SNAP, TANF, benefits, or local identification. So I'm going to say that one more time. As I mentioned earlier, you want to ensure that you are not coding a student economically disadvantaged in addition to their H code unless they have SNAP or TANF benefits or local identification. That is when and the only time you will add the J to your coding. Homeless nighttime residence coding is required for federal reporting. It is important to code all homeless students with one of the 4 homeless nighttime residence codes, 01 through 04. 01 is shelters or transitional housing. 02 is doubled up, living with other persons due to economic reasons. 03, unsheltered, cars, parks, campgrounds, abandoned buildings, substandard housing, or 04, hotels, motels, due to lack of alternative adequate accommodations. So let's look at coding students served with McKinney-Vento subgrant funds. You're going to mark yes for homeless students served by McKinney-Vento subgrants, otherwise no or null. The 21 districts that receive McKinney-Vento subgrants to serve homeless students in 24-25 are listed on the next slide. Under ESSA, identifying and serving homeless preschool children are priorities for McKinney-Vento subgrantees. And homeless programming. Here are the districts who received the McKinney-Vento subgrant for FY24. I am not going to read those off. I will let you quick brief look at this slide. If you're on the slide, you need to make sure that you're coding your students that are served with McKinney-Vento subgrant funds. So let's take a quick look at the McKinney-Vento eligibility scenario. For unaccompanied youth scenario 1, the student's living arrangement meets the McKinney-Vento definition of homeless, and the student is not in the physical custody of a parent or guardian. Therefore, the unaccompanied homeless child or youth is McKinney-Vento eligible. When classifying unaccompanied youth, you mark yes for students who are homeless and who are not living with a parent or guardian. If not an unaccompanied youth, you mark no or null. And now I will talk about the homeless status applied for the school year in this next section. It can be a little tricky, so please do not hesitate to reach out to me or Trish Kelly after this webinar with any questions. So once a student has been identified as homeless, the status will apply for the entire school year. Again, the student is eligible for services for the remainder of the school year and will continue to be classified as yes in the current and all future enrollments during the school year. Please be sure to use the appropriate primary nighttime residence code 01 through 04 for each enrollment. It is also important to note that you will use the code from the initial homeless identification if the student obtains permanent housing. Provide homeless students who transfer or find permanent housing the same services as other homeless students. For example, transportation to school of origin, free school meals, additional services to meet academic and educational needs. When homeless students transfer during the school year, receiving LEAs use the enrollment began date as the beginning date for the homeless fields. The homeless student classification identifies students as homeless for accountability, funding, reporting, and other purposes. It is extremely important that you do not remove the homeless student classification and other homeless fields at the end of an enrollment or school year. It is also extremely important that you do not roll over the homeless student classification or other homeless fields to the next school year. It's important that under McKinney-Vento, homeless liaisons re-verify McKinney-Vento status every year. So you want to be sure that you're not automatically rolling over your data every year, that you want to ensure that they are eligible for services. Now let's talk about earlier this year. Because homeless students can be difficult to track for students who are transferred during the school year, the homeless earlier this year flag is included in the homeless student list research query. The homeless earlier this year flag is Y for students who were identified as homeless in a previous enrollment during the school year. If the homeless earlier this year flag is Y, the homeless student classification should be Y. If the homeless earlier this year flag is Y and the homeless student classification is N, update the homeless student classification H, primary nighttime resident 01 through 04, and SIS EIS. So how would you answer the scenario below? Suppose Tammy transfers into your district during the school year. Her enrollment information does not identify her as homeless. Should you assume she is not homeless? I'm going to give you just a second to think about that. Let's see if you got it right. You would not assume that Tammy is not homeless. Homeless status is difficult to track for students who transfer during the school year. So you want to be sure you run the homeless student list research query and EIS. Next, you will check the homeless earlier this year flag. If it is Y, Tammy was homeless in a previous enrollment during the school year. Remember, homeless status applies for the school year, so you could code and serve Tammy in the same manner as other homeless students. But if it is blank, Tammy was not homeless in a previous enrollment during the school year. Based on the current and previous enrollment information from the school year, Tammy is not homeless. Move into the homeless student list research query. It is a best practice to check the homeless student list research query at minimum once a month. You want to download the data to an Excel or CVS file. You want to identify students who transfer into the LEA or school by comparing the homeless students classification and the homeless earlier this year columns. Identify homeless residency discrepancies by comparing the primary nighttime residents and homeless student classification columns. And you want to research discrepancies identified. You want to enter corrections in SIS and restage your data to EIS. Corrections populate in EIS the day after your data are restaged. To check your data in EIS, log in as an LEA or school user. First, you will select Data, Reports, Research Queries. Next, select the Homeless Student List Research Query. Then select a school or all schools. Last, select View Report. As you can see, I have provided a screenshot of the web page. To check for homeless data discrepancies, you will download the query results to CSV or Excel format by selecting the file icon to the right of the Find Next. Use the filter function to identify discrepancies between the homeless primary nighttime residence code, fourth column from the right, and the homeless student classification, second from the right, and the homeless student classification, second from the right, and the homeless earlier this year flag, far right. The No Discrepancies and Discrepancies slides illustrate how to use the homeless student list research query to identify these discrepancies. So first, let me discuss no discrepancies. As you can see in the table below, there are no discrepancies. All homeless students have a primary nighttime residence code 01 through 04. All homeless students are classified as yes. The homeless earlier this year flag is also yes, and the homeless student classification is Y in subsequent enrollments. So I'm going to give you just a minute to see what discrepancies occurred in each row of the table on the slide. So take a look at the table and see if you can tell me what discrepancies are. So first, in row 1, the homeless residence code is 02, but the homeless student classification is no. In rows 2 and 3, the homeless student classification is yes, but the nighttime residence is blank or 00. Last, the student in row 4 is identified as homeless in a previous enrollment during the school year. The homeless earlier this year flag is Y. Once a student is identified as homeless, homeless status applies for the remainder of the school year. But the student is not identified as homeless in the current enrollment. The homeless student classification is N. So now let's look at ways to avoid homeless data discrepancies. For SIS screens, it's important to train staff on the location of the homeless fields in your SIS. Often they appear on more than one screen. If you are not familiar with these screens, contact your vendor. For cross-validation, SIS packages are required to cross-validate the homeless student classification and the primary nighttime residence code. Be sure to contact your SIS vendor to determine how to implement your cross-validation procedures. When uploading extracts to EIS, determine which extract is needed. Extract 44 is the homeless student classification, and Extract 41 is the homeless primary nighttime residence, homeless served by McKinney-Vento subgrant funds, and homeless unaccompanied youth. A standard sequencing applies when adding the homeless student classification and homeless residence code. Extract 41 must be loaded first. When extract 41 loads values of 01 through 04 from primary nighttime residence, EIS will accept a homeless student classification value of H on extract 44. It's important to note that if the homeless residence code is null or 00 on extract 41, EIS will not accept the homeless student classification value of H on extract 44. A fatal error occurs. If extracts 41 and 44 are loaded at the same time, extract 41 will process first, and then extract 44 will process. When loaded in the opposite order when removing the homeless student classification and homeless residence code, you will need to load extract 44 first to remove the H submitted for the homeless student classification. Next, you will load extract 41 to remove homeless residence codes 01 through 04 or change them to 00. Note, if extracts 41 and 44 are loaded at the same time, extract 41 will process first and generate a fatal error. So for your in-year procedures, you want to look at your SIS packages to ensure that they do not roll over any primary nighttime residence or other homeless fields. And so you need to make sure with your vendor that your packages do not roll over. Again, you want to make sure that your primary nighttime residence and other homeless fields are coded properly. And you want to, again, ensure that you connect with your SIS vendor to make sure that you have your anti-rollover measures in place. To wrap up with some resources, if you would like to see department resources, you can find them in ePlan in TDOE resources under ESSA information guidance and PowerPoints, and then you're going to find your Title IX McKinney Title IX Part A, Education for Homeless Children and Youth information. In there, I have toolkits, webinars, resources, templates that you can use for your homeless programming. And then also for department resources, there's the FPO data manual that you can also reference after this webinar. And then for some federal resources, you visit the National Center for Homeless Education. There's lots of wonderful information that you can use there for your homeless programming. There's self-paced trainings that you can use for yourself and your staff on identification of McKinney-Vento students. You can also visit the Education for Homeless Children and Youth program non-regulatory guidance. And then for nonprofit resources, I highly encourage you to look at Schoolhouse Connections. They also have a lot of great resources about homeless data collection and just supporting your homeless programming in general. For your contact information, if you have McKinney-Vento homeless programming information, please contact me, Vanessa Waters. And I will be glad to assist you with any questions that you have. If you have questions about homeless data and coding, please contact Trish Kelly, the FPO data manager. If you have EIS errors or restaging problems, please contact the district technology support team, and they will be able to assist you. Again, thank you for taking the time out of your day. I know everyone's extremely busy supporting your homeless programming and the families and students that you serve. I do appreciate your time. Please reach out if you have any questions. And at some point, if you feel like there is fraud, waste, or abuse in this presentation or this slide deck, please contact the information provided below. I hope you have a wonderful day. Thanks again.